This is the Horse Radio Network.
This is episode 93 of the Dressage Radio Show, brought to you with the generous support of Equisketch, Kentucky Performance Products and Equestrian Collections. Hello, I'm Chris Stafford, and on the show this week, Mary Wanless and students, plus news from Pippa Cookson in Europe on the absence of FEI rules regarding blood on horses in dressage. Glenda McElroy reports from the West Coast, and Heather Blitz is back in the co-host chair. Hi, Heather.
Hey, Chris. How's it going up there in Kentucky?
It is warming up. It is finally warming up. It is a gorgeous spring day, and things are starting to grow. We had a ton of rain over the last several days, which has greened up the neighborhood, which is really, really nice to see. And even the crocuses are poking their noses out.
All right.
So we're ready for this. I think the country's ready for the summer. Spring, at least.
Yeah, well, you can say that in the northern part of the country, but down here I'm full of dread because it's already... Our highs are already 85 and lows in the upper 60s, 70s. So summer coming for us is a little different story down here in South Florida, but we'll see if we can make it through without melting completely.
Yeah, you're going to spend the entire summer there, are you?
We're going to give it a try, yeah. And I've spent summers in Louisiana, and that's people ask me, well, isn't it the same? And it is sort of, but up there, excuse me, we had such a nice facility with a cover and fans and things like that. It could make a huge difference. So this might be tough.
So this could be getting up really, really, really early in the morning to work the horses and then later in the evening.
Yeah, except, the weather just doesn't follow the rules because sometimes 8 o'clock in the morning is hotter than 10 o'clock in the morning. With the dew point does something weird. And sometimes at 10 it's actually cooler in the air, but then the sun comes up, so you get this little tiny window of when it's like okay to ride. And I can't quite squeeze all my 8 horses into that little window, but I'm gonna have to be creative, I think.
Yeah, I remember back when I was living in the east coast of Italy, on the Adriatic coast, and of course it got so terribly hot in there in the summer. We would get up, at 4 o'clock, and we'd start riding pretty quickly. We'd just get on them because the stalls could be done afterwards. So we'd get on them and we'd ride all the way through till sort of 9 o'clock. 10 o'clock would be really late to be on a horse, but we'd usually get done by 9 o'clock, and that's it. And then you could do all the other stuff, the barn stuff, but then come back in the evening, and do barn chores again in the evening. But in the heat of the day, you couldn't do anything.
No.
And I remember once somebody coming to look at a horse, and I had to lunge it, and it was high noon, and I almost fainted in the heat, not used to being out in the heat that time of day. Too much.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Well, we've got a big show this week, Heather, as I said, and I know you had a really great week last week, a big week for you. You had your coach and mentor, Mary Wanless, join you for a clinic.
I did, and it's just it's always so great, to get help and get a boost into the next sort of level. And I mean, Mary's just a genius, and I admire her so much, and her eye is incredible. So we're going to talk with her later and about how it went, and I'm just thrilled and happy and can't wait to ride this week, and all my horses are much better off for it.
Terrific. All right, as you said, we will come to that, but we do have a couple of items of news, one of which, of course, was round 9 of the Rimac FEI World Cup qualifiers that took place in Gothenburg in Sweden last weekend, and Adeline Korn-Anderson made it 4 now. 4 qualifiers she's won, Heather, with Jarek Parseval. So I mean that's a great run for her, isn't it? In the lead up to the finals.
Yeah, I'm sure she's pretty pleased with that.
Yeah, and so must our friend Patrick Kittle, who's also time to time a co-host here on the show. He scored a very, I should imagine, very satisfying second place for him, 81.025 behind Adeline's 82.875. But I think satisfying for him probably because he beat Vorumnicht and Isabel Werth with 79.775. So an unusual sort of turn of the tables there, I think, between those two.
Yeah, really interesting.
So Adelaide, of course, convincingly tops the standings, though, after round 9 as they go to St. in the Netherlands for the final round on March 24th to the 27th, before the finals in Leipzig in Germany take place from April 27th through May 1st. And those finals, of course, are in conjunction with the jumping finals and the driving finals. It's going to be a big show. Have you ever ridden in Leipzig when you were based in Europe, Heather?
No, never been there.
No, it's apparently a very popular venue, so we'll be following that, of course, with interest here on the show. And also on the West Coast this past weekend, they had a CDI 1-star at the Los Angeles Equestrian Center there in Burbank, California. So I was able to catch up with Glenda McElroy, who's the manager of Cornerstone Dressage, who organizes so many of the events on the West Coast. So let's hear how it all went over there in Burbank. Well, Glenda, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us this week.
Well, thank you for asking. I appreciate it very much.
Well, you had a very busy weekend in there. Manager, as I said in my introduction, you managed the competitions, dressage events down there in Burbank and up in Northern California too. Just give us an overview of the shows that you do manage, Glenda.
Well, our company, Cornerstone Event Management, manages shows here in Southern California, mostly based at the Los Angeles Equestrian Center. We do manage some shows in Northern California from the Woodside Horse Park up in Woodside, California, and then we do a few shows in the Midwest in Colorado for the Colorado Horse Park, and so we stay in a pretty busy schedule.
You certainly do, and of course this weekend you had a CDI 1-star, but you had some stars there too, didn't you?
We certainly did. It was the first of the West Coast trials for the Pan Ams, and it was the first of the CDI 1-stars. It's our midwinter dressage fair, and so we had a lot of the people come out to give their horses a try for this first of the competitions. And then we had some wonderful horses here we hadn't seen all winter from the open division. So it was a wonderful weekend.
Well, let's just talk about the winners. That of course Stefan Peters is a local to you. You've got some pretty smart riders over there on the West Coast, Glenda. I have to say, you know, it's not too shabby. We'll have to have you on the show more often, you know, because bring us up to date with what's happening there, because you've got some great riders and, of course, some great young horses and some horses that we haven't seen too much of. Tell us about those new rides that Stefan has.
Well, Stefan has a wonderful new horse, a horse that he's actually had in his barn for a while, Valentino's Magic, and it's owned by a lady from Las Vegas, Jen Havlicek. And she has been very patient with this horse, and Stefan and Shannon have been very patient with him and brought him along very slowly. But he's a wonderful young horse. I mean, really wonderful young horse, and scored very high with our judges on the panel both times, both in the St. George and in the I-1. He scored 70 in the 77 range, both classes, and he was wonderful, really wonderful horse. Melissa Festerling, her big time horse is, of course, a horse that's been around for a while. He's been around for such a long time. You forget he's such a young horse. He was our 5-year-old representative to Verdun a few years ago, and he's been coming along up the ranks, and he's now in the Prix St. George I-1 and is looking for an opportunity maybe to be on the Pan Am team. And he kind of was second to Stefan's horse in both classes, but he did a great job also scoring in the 70s, the 72 in the St. George and the 73 in the I-1, and so he's a pretty solid guy, and I think you're going to see him knocking on the door for the Pan Am team as well.
Who were your judges this weekend, Glenda?
We had a really nice panel. We had Jane Ayres, Natalie Lamping from the United States, and we had Lorraine McDonald from Canada. We had a lot of Canadian riders.
Well, I was going to say that leads us on to that. You know, my next question. You had quite a few visitors from up north.
We have every year for the last 7 or 8 years. We've had a lot of the Canadians come down from Western Canada, come down to Southern California, and some years we have more than others, but this year there's about 25, 30 Canadians down here showing at the CDIs down here in Southern California, and they come down the first part of January and go home in the beginning of April, and they add a lot to the competition. It's always nice to see nice horses, and Leslie Reed comes down and brings a lot of her clients and a number of other a number of other trainers, and so it's always fun to have the Canadians. They're great fun to have.
Well, you mentioned that Stefan, of course, has got the other horses out, but he also brought his big gun out. How was Ravel looking this weekend?
Oh, Ravel looked super, just absolutely super. He haven't seen him since he came back from WAG. He's been pretty much resting and not really doing too much and just keeping him toned up. But he looked just as good as you could want before he goes back east to the Masters. He looked fresh. He was bright, light, strong. I mean, I just really have to tell you, he looked as good as he's ever looked to me. I thought he just looked super, and Stefan was really pleased with him. Really pleased.
And what did they do? They were in the Open.
They were in the Open Grand Prix. They scored a 75, 75.5. That's all he did with him. He just took him in that one class. He had him here for a couple of days just to kind of get him away from home, and he was just super. He just had a great attitude. The horse just seemed happy, and he was a pleasure to watch. Just a real pleasure.
So, how many classes did you have in total, Glenda, this weekend?
Between the CDI and the Open show?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we had a four-ring show originally when we started out. One ring was for the CDI. Of course, as you know, we had a little bit of everything when it came to weather, from rain to sleet to snow to sunshine, and so we kind of ran the gamut. The first day, Friday, we had beautiful weather, absolutely beautiful weather, 68 degrees, sunny. Everything was super. And then overnight it rained, and we had to move inside to the indoor ring, which we had already had a schedule set up for in case it had rained. So everybody kind of knew that we were going to go to a rain schedule, and it went right along, and the riders were super and very. It just this whole horse show had just a great feel to it. I don't know whether it's because it's the first show and a lot of people hadn't seen each other, but it just had a great weekend, a great feel to it all weekend, and we. And everybody made the best of a I have to tell you, kind of difficult situation, and it was so cold here. I've lived here a long time, and this is about as cold as I've ever seen it here. It was down into the 30s, and that's extremely unusual.
That's
Southern
very
California.
unusual. I would send you just an ounce of sympathy, given the winter we've had here in Kentucky and the rain that you're done with there. We got over here today, so what goes around comes around, right?
Well, I have to tell you, Saturday was a really brutally cold day, and it just rained here all day, and it came from rain to kind of hail to kind of a sleet, and by late afternoon, there were actually snow falling in Burbank, and it has not snowed here since 1937, and that's just unbelievable. I mean, there was enough snow up on the hills to actually make it like snowmen. I mean, it was a lot of, for us, we were all in shock anyway. But anyway, it was an unusual weekend, and one of the real saving graces was that we had a wonderful hospitality area set up that was all enclosed. We had heaters, we had free complimentary, food, hot drinks, for all the riders, and so everybody really enjoyed that. And that was Lisa Seeger Insurance from Markel sponsored that, and it was just a huge hit and made it kind of got the day past the day, and it was nice.
Warmed everybody up. When you mentioned Stefan, we should also mention Shannon. Shannon Peters rode in the Open competition. What was she riding, and did you manage to see her test, Glenda?
I didn't see much of Shannon. She did ride in the Open competition. Shannon brings her clients to the shows fairly often. Shannon always does a great job. She has 3 or 4 new horses that she is showing for herself in the FEI now, and I think as time goes by, you're going to see Shannon more and more. Shannon's quite talented herself. She's kind of gets overshadowed by Stefan sometimes, but I think they're trying to build some horses for her, develop some horses for her that are going to be very competitive. So it'll be interesting. I think you're going to hear a lot more from Shannon in the next couple of years.
Great. Well, we should also give a shout out to Meta Rosenkrantz, of course, a local over there for you. It often shows at the LA Equestrian Center. She won the Prix Saint Georges, and Kathleen Rain was right there behind her. So a lot of the regular local riders. But I also should mention, for those of our listeners who also follow eventing, that Gina Miles, the Olympic silver medalist from Beijing, she was competing there too on the flat.
Yeah, Gina Miles was here. She was competing at in the lower levels. She brought 3 horses that she comes to a lot of our shows. Gina always is looking to improve her dressage, and she comes to our shows here in Southern California and in Northern California. But she brought some lower level horses and she competed in like training first and second, and she's trying to get some of her horses also qualified for some of the year-end championships in dressage as well as eventing.
Well, good for her. And that was just one weekend. But what are you looking forward to next on your schedule, Glenda?
Well, of course, this was the kickoff for the CDIs here in Southern California, and in the next 60 days, there's going to be a number of other CDIs, CDIWs, and CDI 3-stars. So there's a kind of a two-week period where we go from the shows in LA. 2 weeks later, there's a show in Del Mar. 2 weeks later, there's a show up in Northern California. These are all CDIs. Then they come back down to Del Mar for the Del Mar National, which is kind of the end of the 3-stars. And so there's a lot to do here in the early spring, and of course everybody just keeps their fingers crossed for good weather. But.
Absolutely. Well, we wish you good weather, Glenda.
You know, thank you. I need
get
that.
the sunshine, get the warmth
back. I
back.
paid my weather dues.
Well, great to talk to you. I hope you'll come back again and bring us some updates as the season unfolds.
Oh, I'd be very happy to, Chris. Thank you so much for asking.
You know, we don't have to forget our West Coast cousins there. You know, when so much happens in Florida this time of the year, but there's also quite a dressage population there on the West Coast, very, very keen and engaged, Heather, over there. You've been over there, haven't you, a couple of times?
I've only been over there once to compete, and that was in 2004 for the Intermediate Championships. But I don't get out there all that often, just a couple of times for clinics and a few teacher training courses with Mary Wanless, and just one time to show. So it's just such an endeavor to get out there, and it takes a ton of money. And, you know, our country is just so huge. It's a little, you have to remind yourself to keep looking, you know, to their side of the country. It just feels like such a different universe.
It is. Well, we'll make sure we include them here on the show. Well, as I mentioned at the top of the show there, we do have an interesting turn of events in the story regarding Adeline Cornelison and Yerrick Parseval, who were, of course, eliminated at the Alltech FEI World Equestrian Games when they were found to have blood in the mouth, in Parseval's mouth, when he started his dressage test. And Stephen Clark was the judge at sea and had to make that determination that there was evidence of blood. It turned out that the cause of it was just that Yerrick Parseval had bitten his tongue, and by the time he got back to the warm-up arena, there was nothing to be seen. It passed very quickly. However, what the rules that we thought were in place that caused that elimination turn out not to be in place at all. There is no such rule. According to Pippa Cookson, who is the journalist in Europe who has been drilling quite deep and found and examined the rules and found that there is no rule in place. There is no blood rule in dressage. There is in eventing, there is in jumping, and there's nothing in the FEI general rules or veterinary rules to say that that horse should have been eliminated specifically because he had blood on him. So I thought it would only appropriate to hear from the journalist herself who actually dug up this story, and it was published in Horse International. It was since been published as a news item in Horse and Hound, but it certainly is obviously a topic of interest to the dressage world. So I thought we should hear from the person that dug out the story. Well, Pippa, how did this story unfold? Where did it all begin?
Well, I wasn't actually particularly looking out for this particular rule anomaly, as it's turned out to be. I was actually looking into a completely different topic to do with endurance riding and comparing what goes on with other sports. And over the passage of a day or so, I just kept doing a lot of reading, and suddenly I was struck that I couldn't find this famous blood rule. And I kept reading and looking into it and looking at other FEI regulations and asking a few people, thinking that I must have been missing something here. And then eventually it transpired that indeed the rule that everybody believes does exist didn't exist. And obviously I then engaged in debate with the FEI about it, and while in the process of obviously writing, garnering the information that was going to go into my column in Horse International magazine. And the FEI's dressage department, headed by Trond Asmier's opinion, and was that the blood rule, yes, it does not exist specifically, but in the case of dressage, it was covered by various other more general rules, which sort of mitigated against actions which could be seen to be against the wealth of the horse. And the discussion went on from there. I think what's quite interesting about it is not the debate as to whether it's a good rule or whether it's a bad rule. The point is it's not actually a rule. And I think the FEI's line is that, as I say, some of the general regulations and veterinary rules do actually cover it. But then, of course, this sort of thing then often begs other questions, because notwithstanding that, some of the other FEI disciplines, such as eventing and show jumping, clearly don't rely on these general rules, because they do have blood in the mouth specific rules of their own, both of which do allow scope for the horse to continue after veterinary inspection and advice, if appropriate. So I'm afraid it has opened a little bit of a can of worms, and we wait to see what happens next.
What was the Dutch Federation's response to this? Of course, Adeline's chef to keep at the time was Chef Janssen.
Yes, Chef, obviously speaking more as the team manager, not obviously the federation, has confirmed to me on a couple of occasions that he did not know the rule as such did not exist at the time of Kentucky, and that had he realised it did not exist at the time of Kentucky, he would have challenged it if he'd realised this. Of course, hindsight is a wonderful thing, and I'm afraid that of this moment, I'm obviously not quite sure what's happening in that regard.
Is there scope for recourse now after such a time lapse between the event and the realisation that there was no rule in place for which a rider was eliminated?
That side of thing, I must confess, I haven't really looked into yet. I mean, that's just sort of not quite my area of expertise. I'm afraid I haven't really thought about that. I mean, obviously, as a future plan, the FEI dressage department is now looking at clarifying the rule. I mean, they have said to me and gone on the record that they will now write a blood-specific rule to avoid future debate about the matter. And if this is presented to the annual assembly in the usual way and is passed, it will be effected from the beginning of at least 2012 Olympic year. And then in the meanwhile, I'm conscious that the International Dressage Trainers Club and I think the Riders Club have all been asked to give input into how a new rule might read. I think quite a lot of people favour following the eventing rule as a template, but I'm afraid I don't have any further information on exactly how the rule will read at the moment.
Well, you referenced there the time lapse that's involved here, Pippa, with the introduction of a new rule. As we know, in any governing body of sport, it takes a while to process that and for it to go through the machinery, and it would not be until after the European Championships, which take place, of course, later this year, that these rules would come into effect in time for the 2012 season. So in theory, we have a situation where we could go into another major championship and the same scenario could be reversed, if you will. I mean, if we had Adeline, for example, and Farcevor going in and there was blood on the horse's mouth, he bit his tongue as going in again, we've potentially got the same scenario and another judge letting her keep going because there's no rule in place.
Yes, indeed. That is the sort of limbo situation the sport would appear to be in for the next 12 months or so until this is resolved. I mean, I just don't know whether or not riders will be inclined to carry on as usual, because they're, as indeed Stephen Clark said to me when we were discussing this situation in hindsight, you know, he would hope that people would interpret the rules within the sort of the spirit of the sport, if you like. But you know, it is a big deal to travel across the world for something that you've been preparing for 4 years, and you know, if there is scope for you to be eliminated when maybe that rule is not really enforceable, I don't think possibly people would roll over in the same way they would do if it was as yet set out in black and white.
Well, it is an extraordinary situation, Pippa, because as we know, the rules are assumed to be in place, and when officials implement so-called rules, quote unquote, they assume that the people, now, even if the riders are not aware and the trainers, they are taking it for granted. It is a kind of conditioning that we assume those rules are in place.
Yes, conditioning is quite a good word. Sort of another person I spoke to about it was David Hunt, who's the president of the International Dressage Trainers Club, who obviously having some input into this. And he said to me that he wouldn't be at all surprised if the majority of trainers did think that this rule existed, because they are conditioned into it, because of what has gone on before. And of course, a number of national governing bodies in dressage do have their own blood-specific rule. Our own national governing body, British Dressage, over here in the UK, has an incredibly long and involved rule about blood in the mouth that, you know, applies even at obviously very low-level competitions. So I can quite see how this presumption has come about.
Well, interesting story, and thanks again for unravelling this. We will, of course, follow it with interest here on the Dressage Radio Show. Pippa, thanks so much for your time.
Not at all.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder how many people have assumed that there was a rule. I mean, I certainly did, and it seems like it's always been in place that was a kind of a known thing. So it's just real interesting that she thought about digging into this and looking. And of course, now that just is going to be a rule, and that's a good thing in many ways. But you know, as far as horses biting their tongues or just a little tip of their lip or something, that's just such an insignificant and sort of, you know, common thing, and it certainly doesn't denote any abuse or real significant pain in the horse. But I'm sure now we'll have an all or nothing rule in bold type at some point at the FEI ruling. So,
and we will follow this with interest here on the show. Keep you posted here. Well, one of our latest additions to the Horse Radio Network is Equisketch. Equisketch is a great new company dedicated to providing the best mobile apps for every rider. Every app has been designed to be used by riders of all ages and all levels of experience. With Equisketch Dressage, you can replace your dressage paper or dry erase board and begin learning all your dressage tests on your iPhone or iPad. The Equisketch board allows you to study in a flashcard style by hiding the step instructions while visualizing your location in the arena. Every test can also be viewed in a written format and later shared with your dressage students or fellow riders. Equisketch Records allows you to manage all your horses and shows on the go. Track every medication, vet visit, dental exam, farrier work and more, complete with built-in reminders. Equisketch has some of the best-selling equestrian apps on the iTunes App Store, which have already been purchased in over 35 countries. They are available for your iPhone, iPad and iPod Touch. Visit equisketch.com/HRN for more information, or search Equisketch in iTunes. Equisketch, dedicated to making your equestrian life mobile, one app at a time. Well, Heather, I have to ask you, being the iPhone, iPad tech enthusiast that you are, do you have this app yet?
No, I think I've got to be more organized to get that organized.
Yes. All right, well, as we said, you had a busy week last week with Mary Wanless in town, and also I think you've got some students that you invited to the show.
I'm sitting here with my mentor and coach, Mary Wanless, who's been here for the past 3 days helping us all with our riding. And We also have on the phone with us Betsy Rebar-Sell, who's a student of mine and also rode with Mary. It was her first time with Mary. And another student of mine from Fort Lauderdale, isn't it, Linda? Linda Love.
Well, welcome to you all, and that Linda and Betsy, you both attended the clinic this week, and so we're going to hear from you in just a second about what you got from that, because I know you're already students of Heather's, as she said. But let's go to you first, Mary. What is it that you what is it when you get to a clinic that how do you set up your clinic for the week? Does it depend on the students or the country? Because we've had you on the show before, and it's nice to have you back, by the way, because now you've actually been in the thick of it with Heather. What is it that you look for when you set up your clinics over here?
My clinics get set up over here initially through someone who contacts me because of their interest in my work. Normally someone who's read my books or seen the DVDs or been to a symposium. And most of the time in the US, I'm coming back to work with people I already know. So Heather, for instance, I've known for 15 years, and she's been coming on these clinics when she can for 15 years. I mean, it's maybe more what I see when I see a rider in front of me, which is I'm looking at that rider's body, the pattern of what happens in their body, how the horse's movement is affecting their body, how they're affecting the horse. And I just try and find ways to get people in the place that from their and the horse's point of view is going to work.
And how many students did you have this week in Wellington?
Had 8 people on the clinic, so that's 8 45 lessons during a day, and then we also do a question and answer workshop lesson that may also lead to us doing some exercises. So it's normally either 8 students on 45-minute private lessons or 12 students doing our lessons in pairs.
Well, let's characterize that clinic. I mean, Heather, maybe you're a good person to do this because you've been working with Mary for so long. Because each clinic, you take every advantage of spending time with Mary to evaluate what you're doing. Give us a picture of what that clinic looks like. Describe that for us, would you?
Well, in my particular rides, or just how I felt like the rides went overall?
I think generally, yeah.
Well, it's just it's an approach for the horses, and that comes completely through the rider and how they get more and more detail and really bite-sized chunks that they can work with. They get awareness of, how their body affects the horses. And it's just, you end up seeing riders that, even if it's their first time coming into a clinic with Mary, they may not really know what they're in for learning or what their weak points really are, but they end up getting, such major light bulbs really, and these big aha moments that it just really gets exciting to see people break through these walls or these places that they couldn't figure anything out for maybe years previously, that they come here and they get some information that is just, it's really out of the box and just so effective and so real, and stuff that they can take to not only the horse they're riding, but then to horses that, any other horse they ride, and not to mention their friends and peers that are also riding, they can, maybe give some insight to as well. So it's just information that it's very unique, it's very out of the box, and it's very, very, very effective.
Well, let's turn to the students. 2 of your disciples, Heather, Betsy, and Linda. Starting with you, Betsy, was this the first time that you'd ridden with Mary, and what were your impressions of the week?
Yes, it was my first time, and I rode in the clinic without getting to see another lesson. So I just went in there completely not knowing what to expect. I'm a very long-time rider. I've heard the same thing over and over from many different people, very good trainers. And what Mary does is she, as Heather said, she goes outside the box. She comes from a different angle, and she tells us to do things with our bodies that maybe another trainer hasn't said. And many of us, I think lots of people who come to Mary have been with many, many trainers, and it's just not quite working, and this and that, and we have questions, and we try to do what we're told, and we're told to do it over and over, and we try as hard as we can, and it really doesn't quite get the effect we want. And Mary has an incredible eye. She's extremely detailed and discriminating, and it's hard work mentally and physically to kind of tear everything else. It's kind of like peeling an onion, to kind of break down some of your other thoughts and be willing to say, oh, I see, this is a little different. This is a different way of saying it. And wow, it really does make sense. I rode 3 days. It was very hard. It was a wonderful clinic. I liked the way we had then the unmounted workshops so that we could ask questions, and Mary was very, very forthcoming with descriptions and explanations. And I would say Mary works really hard. And
I think that's true.
Yeah. And, again, I've been riding a very long time. And as we know, we all know that riding takes many, many, many years. And sometimes we have to rethink things, approach them a little differently. And Mary helps us to do that.
Just explain to our listeners, Betsy, what level of riding you're at and competing, just to put this in context.
I've been riding a long time. I've ridden through the Grand Prix. I competed for the United States at the Pan American Games in 1999, and we were the team gold medalists, and I was fourth individually. I've been riding a long time and doing the Grand Prix for a good 10 years. But I keep going back to the drawing board and saying, no, wait a minute, how could I get this better? Why isn't this working? Why isn't that working? And right now I'm competing, just started competing a horse at the Prix St. George I-1 level that Heather found for me. And I started working with her a year ago when I got this horse.
I want to come back to you, Mary, because we often hear this about your style and therefore, the style that Heather has now, and in terms of not only her riding but teaching, and it is all about communicating. And we often hear things like how you break things down to bite-sized pieces, you peel back the layers of the onion. Where does this all come from, Mary?
Well, it comes from my own experience when, as a young rider and coach, I worked my way up through the British Royal Society exams and, learned to say the things you say when you stand in the middle of a riding arena. And I said them to other people just like my teachers had said them to me. But really and truly, I knew it wasn't working that well. And I knew I wasn't a very talented rider. And in my late 20s, I actually gave up in despair. And it just felt like my teacher was saying the same things over and over again, saying them louder. I was trying to do them. I was trying to do the same things harder. And in the end, it drove me to giving up riding. And I started again about 6 months later. And at that point in time, had nothing to lose by really just thinking out of the box. And now that I wasn't trying to be a good rider anymore, I'd given up on that idea. I just started noticing things in a whole new way. And it was the way I started noticing, the way I started putting two and two together for myself, the way that started working for my students, the other things I learned outside of riding that were going to help me, like learning about how people learn and doing biofeedback and different things like that showed me more about the body-mind. And that whole level of research and learning has continued over the 30 years since, as has my own attempt to learn to ride and communicate those learnings to others.
Break.
May I say something at this point? This is Betsy.
Okay, yes, let's bring you back in, Betsy, sorry.
Sorry. I wanted to say what Mary said. Dressage, we keep following the same old principles, which we all nod and say, yes, they're all very, yes, I agree. But our sport doesn't often borrow from other places. And I think what Mary said is really important, that we need to sometimes go outside of our little dressage world and get information from, like, scientific information, get information from other places.
Well, let's just bring Linda in. Linda, was this the first time for you to be attending one of Mary's clinics, as you're a regular student of Heather's?
This was actually the second clinic that I had taken from her, and I had audited one as well. So this would have been the third time that I had been in front of her. And I have, before I had taken a clinic from her, I actually have all of her, I don't even have the equipment to play it anymore, but the big, the VHS tape. So, which I probably had purchased like about 10, 12 years ago. So I've been on this huge quest to try to figure out what I was doing wrong. And then I had read her book, so to finally get in front of her about 3 years or so ago was just such a thrill, and I had so many breakthroughs. And then it was probably a good 2.5 years that this clinic that I took this past week before she saw me again.
And just to put this in context for our listeners, Linda, what level of riding are you at and experiencing competition?
Well, I would say I'm at a totally different end from where Betsy was. Betsy is. I had done the hunters. I have a show hunter. I had ridden as a hunter for years and years on the A circuit. And I finally stopped. And one of the reasons that I was so interested in Mary is because I pretty much reached the same point. Is I knew that I was creating situations in my horse, whether I was adding to a potential of unsoundness. The trainers would say something to me. It's like, this doesn't feel right. My body doesn't feel right. A lot of times I would feel that I know that I'm crooked, or I know that I'm not using a particular muscle group, but no one could really, they would just say, well, move your leg here, put your heel there, so on and so forth. And so as a result, I took a step back, and I actually had gotten into, at that point, rehabbing my gelding, and then I started riding in dressage, and I have a younger horse now. I purchased a younger horse, and I'm bringing her along. I had taken a clinic from Heather also, which was just so incredible, and she has been kind enough to bring me in her fold. And it's all I can say is every ride is just such a breakthrough. It's incredible, and it's things that instinctively when Mary or Heather, they will say something, and it's like, of course. And a lot of it also, what I feel like Mary's effectiveness is she actually will put her hand on, in order for you to understand on certain parts of your body. It's like, oh, okay, now I understand. And I could picture that. There are things in the clinic that I took this past week that I'm still working on, because physically she touched that part of my body that I can still feel it, and I can still work on it. So you can take it with you from that point on. It really is amazing.
Well, this is interesting, the takeaways that you guys have. I mean, obviously it is a fascinating methodology, and we're delighted that you were able to share this time with us and explain what you got from the clinic. Mary, just coming back to you now, as we know, you travel all over the country with these clinics. What next for you?
I'm going to Dayton, Ohio, which is going to be a little colder than here in Wellington. So I go to Dayton and then Atlanta and Charlotte on this trip. And then I'm back in May. Where am I going in May? I think I'm going to Philadelphia and Maryland and Minnesota and Nashville in May.
Well, you suddenly get around the U.S. And now, do you have any new DVDs coming up? Not the old VHS. Obviously, we can't play those anymore, Mary.
Well, they are available on DVDs. The
okay.
old ones are available on DVD, and they're available on my website.
Okay.
Which is mary-onelist.com.
Right.
And yes, I am working on another DVD package, and we also have a new package that's on dismounted exercises to develop core strength and symmetry.
All right.
But I'd just like to say something else about the clinic here, which is that I don't know that it's so often where you get a clinic and a clinician where we can have Linda, whose background is hunters, and for her to go out and do a second level test probably would be a big thing for her. And Betsy, who's ridden at Grand Prix and ridden internationally. And for those two riders to be able to come on the clinic, and for me to be able to help people at those levels equally well, I think is one of the exciting things about this approach, because the basic thing is the laws of physics and biomechanics don't change whether you're a first level rider, a Grand Prix level rider, whether you have an expensive horse or a backyard horse. The principles of riding are the same. And I think in doing this work, that really shows.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for spending time with us. Come back anytime, Mary. And and enjoy the rest of your clinic tour here. And I know while you were down there in Florida, you did get a chance to look at Heather's scruffy pony. How's he looking?
Oh, Heather Scrappy Pone looks very good. Yes, best of ever every time I see it.
All right. Well, we're going to be talking about His Royal Highness Paragon a little bit later on in the show. So thank you all for joining us this week on the Dressage Radio Show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I've been working with Mary for, I guess, the past 15 years or so, and I'm just, never going to be, I'll never get enough of it. No matter what level my writing becomes, it's just always so interesting to see what she has to say and what she comes up with. It really improves me at my level of writing, and it just doesn't matter whether you're more towards the beginning of your experience in writing or you're quite experienced like me. It just there's always something that Mary can just really add to in ways that are pretty out of the box and pretty different and very effective. So the students got a really great week. We had a lot of auditors, great horses, we had good weather. It was just a super, super week.
Well, our thanks again to all our guests, Mary, Betsy, and Linda. And no doubt you're going to be on the road giving clinics after you finish down in Wellington. But you've got shows before then, don't you, Heather? Shows coming up this weekend?
This weekend, I have Paragon in the Prix St. George and I won at the Derby, starting on the 5th. And the very following weekend, I'll be showing at the CDI that they're running along with the World Dressage Masters at the Jim Brandon Center. So got those two important ones coming up.
Brilliant. Well, we're going to talk about Paragon, of course, a little bit later on and in Paragon's diary. But before we get to that, and before we get to Heather's tip this week, I want to remind you about our valued sponsors, Equestrian Collections. Of course, it's coming that time of the year where you start to dig out the show clothing and equipment for the spring season, only to find that it's finally beyond repair. Well, there's an easy solution to that problem with a visit to equestriancollections.com. They have the latest in spring and show clothes for you, your spouse, and your kids at prices you can afford. Not only do they have a great selection, great prices, and a state-of-the-art website, that is what you get for looking to Equestrian Collections for all your spring and showing needs. So go to equestriancollections.com. Well, Heather, your tip this week, I believe, is an interesting transition.
Well, yeah, I just thought about reminding riders out there listening that as you go up the levels, you might forget or not put enough emphasis on the trot to canter and canter to trot transition. And that seems like a really simple one because younger and greener horses start out, of course, going to canter through the trot. And as you go up into the medium levels, you compete in the medium levels, they don't require that transition. And then they really don't bring it back again all the way until the Grand Prix. So it's an easy one to forget. You tend to go into a lot of collection and go from canter to walk, which is really a collecting exercise. And you find it maybe when you try again with a medium level or Prix St. George horse that going from canter to trot is more difficult because they actually have to lengthen into that transition. And you might think going into trot from canter, you would want to bring a horse back into a lot of collection. And if the horse starts to know collection really well, especially if they're schooling Grand Prix, that much collection, then, getting them to almost flatten out or almost fall into the trot can be a lot more challenging than you think. So just my tip was just kind of a reminder to use trot to canter and canter to trot as a reminder of what it is to make that transition, and to be able to do that along with the walk canter transitions is there's an interesting dynamic in there, and you might find some improvement in your horse's ability to listen to you, and also just to find suppleness and a little more kind of specific organization in your horse just by adding that transition back in, and then you'll be ready for the Grand Prix.
Yeah, just like that.
Just like that.
You make it sound so easy, Heather. And you make it look so easy, too.
Thank you.
I'm thinking you, because of the body work that you've done with Mary, your body must be in such, of course you have youth on your side as well, but your body must be so fit, your abs must be just so firm. You must be, your core must be so strong.
Well, strong, yes. Healthy, definitely. Like, I don't have. Sorry, my dogs are fighting over a bone. don't have a lot of resistance or tension in my neck or my lower back. I'm not even going to knock on wood because I think it's for real reasons that I operate from my core so much. And just as another little note here, that, when you train with the same things in mind with your horse, that you don't train for you don't always think hind legs, you don't always think supple in the neck, you don't always think the exterior, but you think the interior on the horse, that they have to also get that kind of core strength and stability and balance in the middle that I think your track record for healthy horses might increase, when you increase their general sense of, balance and being in an athletic position within their body, that you end up stressing their body less on ways that a lot of dressage horses tend to break down if they don't have that kind of stability. So I think it helps both horse and human to really locate those core muscles and really operate everything from there.
Yeah, it sounds easy, but it is so fundamental to probably everything that we do. Our whole posture, whatever activity we do, is getting those core strengths really developed. And, it's so easy for me to sit here and say that, and I'm so out of shape.
It's a lot of work. It takes a lot of strength, that isometric strength. It does take a lot of work and concentration, but man, is it worth it.
Yeah, it really is. Well, good for you, Heather. Well, I know that you have a lot of fans out there who write to me constantly, and I mean that love your tips and love to hear you on the show. So I also want to remind you that a lot of Heather's tips also get played again on Horse Tip Daily over there with Glenn, who produces that show every day. There's a new tip on Horse Tips Daily, and if you want to listen to Heather's tips one after the other, you can go and download them there from Horse Tips Daily. Well, we're going to come to Paragon's diary here shortly, and but before we do, we're going to hear a reminder of our sponsors, Kentucky Performance Products. And when horsemen were asked what they were looking for in a nutritional supplement, the answer was easy: one that's affordable, effective, and scientifically proven. Kentucky Performance Products took that message to heart and developed supplements to meet those needs. All of their supplements, from Nalox Equine Antacid to Summer Games Electrolytes and Joint Armor, are formulated based on sound research. They're affordable, and you can count on them to deliver results. To choose the right KPP supplement for your horse, visit kpp.usa.com. That's kppusa.com. Or call 1-800-772-1988. To learn more about horse nutrition and interact with experts at KPP, be sure to join their Facebook page too. And our thanks again to our loyal sponsors there, KPP. And I have a reminder for you too. There are so many ways to listen to our show, and here is one of them. Well, Heather, we started Paragon's Diary some time ago when you first came on the show, and your superstar over there is just getting much more and more important and full of himself, to the point now I understand he even has his own Twitter feed.
Yes, he's just decided to go and be and tweet, which I think is a riot. He's Facebook and saying things through my Facebook and his just isn't enough for him, so he had to start tweeting. Risen to the title of His Royal Highness, so I think his name on Twitter is HRH Paragon.
Well, he also, I believe, had a quiz contest on his fan page, which was supported with generous prize by, of course, our sponsors here, Equestrian Collections. Tell us about that, and are you going to announce the winner for us today?
We will be announcing the winner on his fan page today, and it's a prize sponsored by Equestrian Collections. It's a luggage set. It's really nice. And the quiz was to guess his favorite treat, what saddle he wears, his height, and his weight. So I think we have somebody who has answered within very, very, very close exact. And there were a lot of good guesses and some that were a little further off, but we'll be announcing that winner today. Oh,
wonderful. All right, so you can go to his fan page there on Facebook. Just search for Paragon. And, of course, as Heather says, he's on Twitter too at HRH Paragon. And Heather's also on Twitter. You tweet away too, don't you, Heather? Heather Blitz?
Every now and then, yes, you keep me on my toes and doing that as often as I can.
All right, and of course you can follow Heather's fan page on Facebook. You have a very active fan page too, Heather. A great following there. It's a marvelous thing, isn't it? This social networking.
Well, it is. It really is. And I just watched that movie, The Social Network, and it's so profound what all this does around the world. But it's a great bunch of fun to have the fans chime in and to be able to let everyone know what's going on and what we're doing. So it's a great tool.
It certainly is, and you do keep your fans appraised of too. And you said earlier that you've got 2 shows coming up. This weekend and then the following weekend. So busy time for you. What else can we expect from the Blitz Dressage team in the coming months?
Well, I struggle to plan things a long time in advance just because things change so much that I tend to wait and see what my plans will be. So I have some clinics coming up in the spring and maybe a little bit into the summer, but there's still a few unknowns, some big unknowns that can't announce yet, that will determine, how many clinics I do, how many shows I do after the season's over here. But, the season winds up here in Florida about mid-April, so then things really shift gears and sort of normal life begins again. And kind of looking forward to that, but the season's been really exciting and fun at the same time.
Absolutely. Well, it sounds like you've got very exciting prospects with Paragon there. We will, of course, follow him with interest. Don't forget, check his fan page, follow him on Twitter, and, of course, we'll bring you updates here at Paragon's Diary when Heather is co-hosting the show. And you do keep a blog, don't you, on your website too?
Yes, I do. I don't blog as often as I should. Feel bad about that, but I try to get to it, and I put up one just a few days ago, so I will keep those coming.
So you're blogging, and of course there are video links too on your websites to your tests, which is also always nice because I know your fans like to see those tests as well if they can't get to the shows themselves. So don't forget to go to heatherblitz.info. That's www.heatherblitz.info. We'll put a link as always on our show notes. And if you have any questions for me, any comments for Heather, or anything that you'd like to share with us on the Horse Radio Network, send me an email at chris@horseradionetwork.com. Well, Heather, that wraps it up. I want to wish you the best of luck with your competition this weekend and the following weekend. We will follow you with interest, as always, on the Dressage Radio Show. Thanks so much for spending time with us this week, Heather.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on, Chris.
Well, I will be back, of course, same time, same place next week. So until then,
good luck, everybody, and thanks for listening.